Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30. College football.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Big Six
It's
is
crazy.
Evening,
That's all.
ladies
Let's
and
start the
gentlemen.
show.
Welcome in once again to the Outputting Our Coverage show. Got plenty to talk about as usual tonight. A huge weekend of upsets in the SEC this past weekend. Lots of the major players going down. The SEC East completely drunk at this point.
Just in shambles.
In just disarray. We'll talk about that in a little while. But David, before we jump into some on-the-field results, let's talk about some off-the-field events that some of which have been hanging around for a long time. Some of them haven't. The definition of a long time, about 2 years for the University of Miami sanctions. Finally, the finality everyone was looking for coming down this week. Nothing major at this point above and beyond what Miami has already kind of self-imposed on themselves.
9 total scholarships, 3 over the next 3 years.
Yeah,
I think they can handle that.
Not much at all. They had already taken a 2-year bowl ban. They'd also sat out the conference championship game that they would have been eligible for, I believe, last year.
Yeah.
So you could argue that they've taken some pretty significant penalties. But, David, I just want to review some of the things that came out.
I think this gets glossed
over
over a lot. I'm glad you're doing this.
Let's just recall some of the things that took place here. A booster basically paid for a whole bunch of players to come hang out with him on his private yacht, airplane tickets, massive parties, bar tabs.
Allegedly an abortion.
Yeah, that's my favorite one, the abortion that got paid for.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that in any of the articles the past couple of days. Maybe it wasn't true, but
Right.
I like to believe that it was.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's pretty bad.
It was pretty bad stuff. Now, I will say this. After the Penn State stuff comes out, it kind of reset the landscape a little bit as far as what is a real scandal and what's not. Completely different type of thing. But fair or not,
yeah.
I think it changed people's perceptions a little bit.
And you can argue that Penn State should not have been penalized by the NCAA. I mean,
I don't think they should have.
I agree they shouldn't have.
But, just the level of public outrage for that was much worse than it was for the Miami stuff now. And really, I almost feel like the Penn State, the unilateral action that was taken by Mark Emmert and the NCAA folks just pushed the general public over the edge to where they don't even care anymore.
Well, and I don't know. I'm going to go back to it a little bit. I think everybody considers the fact that the NCAA really screwed the pooch in the investigation part of why the sanctions were lessened. Do you think that Miami being undefeated, looking ahead at a Florida State matchup that's going to get huge numbers, does that have anything to do with it?
I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, because if you say you have a bowl ban this year and you're getting scholarships and you can't play in a bowl in the next couple years, the Miami game becomes unimportant.
Yeah, I mean, I would believe that more if USC hadn't gotten hammered so hard. It'd be easier to believe the NCAA trying to protect major programs.
But that was preseason. That was not in the middle of a season. USC was expected to be good, but they had no idea.
I agree. I mean, I guess I can see that. But I mean, if you're slamming USC at all, then maybe you still have some shred of credibility. But that was a different time too. I mean, that was a couple of years ago, which doesn't seem like that long ago. But the NCAA's, the people that work there, a lot of them are gone since then, and it's just a completely different attitude at this point. So, not quite sure what to make of all that. I did think one interesting thing that kind of got glossed over out of this, a couple of the assistant football coaches and the former basketball coach in Miami, Frank Haith, who was the basketball coach there. He's now the coach at Missouri. They determined that this basketball coach basically funneled money through his assistant coaches at the time to shut up the rogue booster, the one who was paying for abortions and whatnot. He got suspended for like 4 or 5 games at the beginning of the season. The games where you don't play anybody. It doesn't matter at all. You look at that, and then you look back to Bruce Pearl. You remember him?
Yeah.
At Tennessee.
Tennessee coach.
He did some sort of questionable things as well.
Most of them were phone calls and texting.
I mean, recruiting violations. Dude got a show cause penalty, which basically means it's almost impossible for him to be a college coach. The university that employs him has to show cause, basically, of why they think that should be overturned.
Right.
What?
If I'm a university who's struggling in basketball, I go hire Bruce Pearl and show the cause as the sanctions at Miami.
That's why right now I'm calling up Jay Jacobs to say, hey, man, it's time to fire Tony Barbie. Bruce Pearl train coming down. Let's do this.
Oh, do you think he could turn it around that quick?
Not really, because I think actually the new arena was built on top of an Indian burial ground.
It's a really nice arena.
That's the only explanation I can come up with at this point.
It's really nice. I've been there.
It's really nice, but the team, it doesn't matter what they do, they're terrible, David. Anyway, that's an aside, but that's one interesting thing. Speaking of show causes, Louisville assistant Clint Hurt, their defensive line coach, who was at Miami at the time. Pretty hot name, was actually tossed around when Gus Malzahn came through at Auburn. There was talk of bringing him in as the defensive line coach. He has been hit with the 2-year show cause penalty, which under any normal circumstances would mean you pretty much getting fired immediately. However, Louisville has said they're going to stand behind him and they're not going to get rid of him.
Do they have to show cause?
I'm not really sure how that works.
If he's already there?
The statement that Louisville gave was something along the lines of, we are committed to a culture of compliance here. We do not... And they had said previously that they would stand behind Clint Hurt if they determined that he had not lied to the NCAA.
Right.
The NCAA basically said, Clint Hurt lied to us. And Louisville basically said, we don't believe you.
Right.
So...
Well, at this point, why should anybody believe the NCAA?
Well, that's a good point. That's an excellent point.
And I think that's probably what Louisville's playing off of. Now, they probably should have just gone ahead and let him go because Louisville season is done.
It's over.
They lost a game in a weak schedule. They're done.
Let's just be real here, too. There is no way Charlie Strong is still at Louisville after this season.
I don't think so.
I can almost guarantee it.
I don't think so. There's going to be a bunch of high-profile jobs. He's a big name. I don't think that he's going to stay there. However, he also had a chance to jump ship last year, and he really likes Louisville for some reason.
But the jobs weren't as good last year as they are this year. There's some better jobs open.
Well, I mean, you're talking top 3 jobs in the country. So,
and, if you're Louisville, why put yourself at risk here when you know you're about to go back down to earth a little bit? If you want to have any chance of attracting a good coach at all, the NCAA sniffing around is not going to help you.
No.
It's just stupid.
It doesn't make any sense.
Speaking of stupid, don't know if you saw this, David, but Oregon's defensive coordinator, Nick Aliotti, a guy who's been there for a really long time. He's been around the high, fast-paced offense, scoring lots of points.
The new Pac-12.
Yeah, the new Pac-12. Oregon played Washington State last week, and as you all know, the Dread Pirate Leach is manning the controls of the Washington State ship.
Who has gotten a little better.
Yeah, they've improved. But we also know that a Mike Leach offense is going to pass the ball about 100 times a game. It's just going to happen.
It's going to be roughly about 90% of the plays.
Even on his running plays, he's passing.
Right.
Just short passes. That's what he does. Oregon's defensive coordinator, when Oregon was up huge, I mean, they're up by like 20 or 30 points.
I think they won the game by 35.
Yeah, I mean, they got the scrubs of the scrubs in there. After the game, the post-game press conference, Oregon's defensive coordinator complains that Mike Leach was still passing the ball late in the game and still trying to score.
That's just dumb.
Just mind-blowing, really. You're winning the game. I can understand if Mike Leach is destroying you, which I'm sure he will be trying to do every year from here on out.
Well, but he's at Washington State. I don't know that that's that big a threat.
Yeah, probably not, but still, he's going to try to do that. It'd be different if Washington State's beating you in the ground and they're still trying to pass. They're losing the game. They're still trying to score points because, I'm sorry, the object of the game is to win.
And consider the source in this. You're talking about an Oregon coach
who
wins all their games by at least 35 when they're playing inferior opponents.
Hypocrisy.
I mean, known for blowing up scores and scoring 70 in a game.
Yeah, that's just stupid. Coaches need to learn to keep their mouths shut. I guess Lane Kiffin's gone, so somebody else had to step up in the Pac-12 to make a stupid comment.
And my money was on Leach.
Surprisingly. Nick Aliotti, by the way, fined $5,000 by the Pac-12, so there goes about an hour of his pay, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't, is that behind the back pay or?
Well, see, that's the question. We don't know. Speaking of messes, we've got to mention this real quick. The big time spotlight of big time football. There's a lot of money floating around, a lot of perks. I mean, speaking of Oregon, if you look at the new players' facility that they built, I mean, they imported bamboo floors from Brazil, and it's just ridiculous some of the stuff they did.
It's kind of like the $40 million place that the Pope fired a guy for.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Alabama has a waterfall in their locker room now. Right. I mean, it's a little ridiculous. But, that
recruiting.
The high school kids, the things they like are ridiculous. So you can understand that. That's one end of the college football spectrum. Unfortunately, the other end, Grambling, one of the traditionally most successful football programs in Division II, is just in complete disarray at this point. The players actually forfeited this past week's game. They were on strike, basically. They didn't practice at all last week because they're so upset about the coach getting fired, the terrible state of the team's facilities.
Traveling,
from Louisiana to Indianapolis by bus, and then another trip the next weekend from Louisiana to Kansas City by bus.
And they weren't being paid for meals while they were on the road?
No pay for meals. Some of the players have actually gotten staph infections from wearing uniforms that haven't been cleaned properly. I mean, it's just a mess. It's real bad.
It is, and it's about to get worse because Jacksonville, was it Jacksonville State they were going to play? Last week, the game they forfeited.
Jackson State.
Jackson State is going to sue them now.
Really?
Because they said they lost millions of dollars because it was a homecoming game for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have an opponent, those football programs depend on that gate revenue to run. It's not like the big boys where, the ticket revenue is not your driving force. I mean, that is their revenue stream.
Right. You're not seeing a whole lot of Jack State shirts going around.
Right. So it'll be interesting, to see what happens, certainly with this on the Grambling level. There's been a lot of talk about, the college football players feeling exploited these days, not getting their cut of the money. And you actually, you can see, if you look on the internet, there's been a movement to start a college players union, basically.
I think a couple people came out with letters on their gear a couple weeks ago. Northwestern, I think, was one of the teams.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see if they get involved with this Grambling situation. Probably not, because
they don't exist yet.
It's a different level of football, and there's not as much money to be made there. But the Grambling players are the ones who need a union.
Oh yeah,
not the guys who are getting a free education.
Northwestern and Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean those guys aren't the ones who need it. But just goes to show that a lot of people say that all the football players have it so easy and they're the big men on campus. Yeah, it's true a lot of places, but it's not true everywhere.
That's right.
There's still some wrongs that need to be righted. Let's try to wrong some of our rights.
All right.
We'll take a quick break here, and we'll be back on the other side of outputting our coverage. It's time for SEC preview.
SEC, Big 10, Big 12, 12 can't count. SEC, college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong. And Missouri and Texas A&M as well.
Yeah, SEC preview.
Here we go.
All right, we are back here on outputting our coverage. David, as we mentioned, crazy week in the SEC last week. Basically, every top team other than Alabama went down.
I think everyone in the East lost somehow.
Yeah, it really seemed like everybody did. Let's start with Auburn, Texas A&M. We were talking about it before the show.
It's a strong game to start with.
It's a very strong game to start with, very near and dear to my heart. My wife will tell you that at the conclusion of the game, when D. Ford made the sack on one Johnny Football, I may or may not have run around my house screaming like a schoolgirl. So
I wish I had been there to see that.
It was somewhat embarrassing, but also somewhat satisfying. This game played out pretty much exactly like I thought it would. Lots of scoring on both sides. It was going to come down to who could get crucial stops when it needed to happen. Texas A&M never had an answer for Auburn's running game.
No.
Auburn almost never had an answer for Johnny Manziel getting free until it mattered the most, and then they were able to get the stops they needed.
Yeah, it was big-time stops there at the end. Big sack, of course, right at the end. Johnny Manziel going down on what looked like a move where he juked himself out. But, big time to hold him to a field goal right there down in your territory.
So now the question becomes, how good is this Auburn team really? I think some Auburn fans may be getting ahead of themselves. If you start looking ahead, it's easy to kind of get caught up and think, wow, man, this team could have one loss going into the Iron Bowl. It's possible, yes. However,
I think more possible with the win that you just had.
Yes, certainly more possible. And with the injury situation of some other teams, it's certainly possible. However, let's not forget where this team was last year. I think if nothing else, maybe take some more time to enjoy the fact that they are where they are and not necessarily think so much about what's coming the next couple of weeks.
I think that's really good advice.
Because there's probably going to be some disappointments. I don't want to say that for sure. However, if you look at the remaining schedule, you have Florida Atlantic this week. That's a win. You don't have to worry about that. In fact, I will say that last year, that would have been a game that would have been on the pick'em. This year, I feel confident not to put it on the pick'em.
Well, I will go ahead and throw this out there. I think early it will be close, just because that's a huge win.
I can see that.
A&M.
There's probably going to be some letdown there.
I think so, but yeah, no problem with the win.
Okay, so you got that one. Then you got to go to Arkansas, who admittedly has looked terrible, but they're trying to save their season. Auburn has historically had lots of trouble going to Arkansas. Not a gimme by any means.
It's not. And remember, I predicted last week that they would jump up and get somebody.
Yeah, so certainly
that's gold.
Certainly not easy. Tennessee, after this past weekend, we'll talk more about that. They look like a pretty significant threat. You have to go to Neyland Stadium. That is a very tough game. In fact, that is a game that will be a game-time decision for me for my pick.
Really?
That's for sure.
I think I would take Auburn right now.
I don't know.
Tennessee's they're doing well, but their defense is letting up a lot of points.
We'll see. I'll be interested to see how they play against Alabama this week, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But I don't know. I certainly don't think that's an easy game. Georgia was really they've been decimated by injuries, but they may be getting some of those folks back.
I was about to say, you're talking 4 to 5 weeks down the road.
Right. I mean, so there's some time. Todd Gurley already talking about coming back possibly this week. I think that game becomes tougher. You can never discount Aaron Murray. It's in Auburn, so that helps you.
It does.
But still not an easy win. And then, of course, the Iron Bowl in Auburn, that's going to be a tough one as well. So no cakewalk.
No.
But it's just good to be in the game.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Put it that way.
I say enjoy it and just ride the wave.
Yep. Just if nothing else, Auburn's going to go to a decent bowl this year. That's a huge accomplishment in itself from last year.
Right, you've already guaranteed that.
Yeah, you're bowl eligible at this point. So let's talk about Alabama. They destroyed Arkansas last week. Not really a surprise there.
I mean, that was over before it started.
Tennessee this week, though. It's in Tuscaloosa. We saw Tennessee take down a South Carolina team last week that still seems a little bit overrated to me. I don't think
definitely.
South Carolina is that great.
They were overrated by us. I mean, we thought they'd be a lot better right now.
Connor Shaw probably not going to play this weekend. I'm sorry. I'm still thinking South Carolina or Tennessee. Still doesn't have a quarterback.
Worley.
Either way.
Yeah. Justin Worley.
I don't know. I mean, I could see maybe if it was at Tennessee, potentially there being room for an upset there, but I'm not seeing it, David.
I don't see it. I don't know that Tennessee can score enough points. I think their defense will do all right for a little while. They're going to be hyped up. And this is the biggest game for the year for them.
Sure.
But the points spread is at 28.5. I would probably say Tennessee can stay under that.
I don't think Alabama wins by that much.
No, because one of the things Alabama loves to do is play a slow, plodding game for the most part. So, 14, 17 points, but I don't see it being any closer.
Yeah, I agree. Probably a 2 to 3 touchdown range, a win there. But give credit to Butch Jones. He has got the Tennessee program headed in the right direction. That's for sure.
Yeah, I remember talking about Butch Jones, thinking that he is definitely a good fit there. I just was always curious about how many years it would take. He's showing signs in year number 1. For Alabama, though, a big loss that not a lot of people are talking about. Vinny Cincinnati is out for the year.
Man, so many torn ACLs this year.
Yeah.
As somebody who has torn their ACL, I feel bad for those guys, but it just seems like there's been over prevalence of them this year.
There have been a lot of ACL injuries.
The secondary for Alabama had already been kind of an issue this year. You lose a pretty key contributor there.
They get Ha back though, which is big.
You get him back, but
they've got some young talent at Alabama in the safety department, but they're not experienced. I mean, that's the thing about Sinceri is he was experienced. He knew where to be, made some big plays. You might not get the same thing out of the safeties there, but they are talented.
Yeah, Tennessee probably can't exploit that
without a quarterback.
Yeah, it's unfortunately for them. But yeah, Tennessee, I think they're headed in the right direction. They have some talent there. They've had some good recruiting classes. Butch Jones is putting together a great recruiting class for next year. I think he's got them headed in the right direction, and that's good news for Tennessee fans because it looks like for the next couple of years, the East may be wide open for the taking.
Which is a good point. And you never think about Tennessee right now when you're talking about the East. I'd love to see them in the conversation again.
Yeah, no, I mean it's been a while for them. It's been since the late '90s since they've been relevant, basically.
Right. And back with Peyton and Martin.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah. So you have to imagine that with things being cyclical and as much money as Tennessee usually has when their athletic department's not bankrupt,
right?
They'll get back to where they need to be. Let's talk about some of these East upsets from last week, David, and just see if we really feel like they were that surprising. We already talked about Tennessee and South Carolina. Of course,
to me, that was surprising. I mean, I knew Tennessee was getting better. I knew South Carolina was not as good as we expected them to be, but that was still surprising to me.
It is a little surprising. Steve Spurrier really shot himself in the foot with his game planning, called some pretty stupid timeouts in the fourth quarter, trying to kind of guess on formations, and those ended up really coming back to bite him.
Well, and they've had a lot of problems with getting their offense set anyway.
Right.
So.
Yeah, really, I think Jadeveon Clowney has been more of a distraction for this team than a help. He's been a bigger negative than a pro, certainly, for this year.
I don't know that he's really that good.
Yeah.
Now that I go back and think about it, it was the one hit. It's the one hit that really got us excited.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's a highlight reel player. He's not an every down player.
I don't even know that he could be on the same level as like a Dwight Freeney in the NFL.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Certainly not been an impressive season for him. As we mentioned, Connor Shaw probably not going to play this week. And that's a problem because they've got Missouri this week.
Who was the other big upset?
Yeah, Missouri. You can't really call it an upset, though, because they were actually ranked higher.
That was an upset. I mean, Missouri beat a banged-up Georgia. So we all kind of discounted that game.
Right.
Florida, I don't know that we gave them credit enough for being as banged up as they are. But they're
banged up, but their offense would have been terrible otherwise.
Their offense is awful.
Yeah.
And, I mean, of course, it didn't help any that they had a defensive player thrown out early on a terrible targeting call. It was just sad that they reviewed that and upheld it. But, Florida, I don't know what to think about them anymore.
Yeah, Florida, I know what to think about them.
Never pick them again.
Something's got to change. I'm not picking them for the rest of the season. There's a problem there. I don't know what it is.
I think if you're a Florida fan, and Muschamp wants to leave it the year, you bid him good riddance.
Well, think about this, David. After 3 years, Will Muschamp and Ron Zook have basically identical records at Florida.
It's true. I don't think he's the guy there.
I don't either. I think it's kind of one of those things where, maybe like similar to Gene Chizik, which is kind of a weird parallel. They were both defensive coordinators at Texas. I think the game's kind of passed them by a little bit.
I think so. I don't know. I think his intimidating stare only works so much.
Yeah.
I think he's starting to lose it.
He's tried a couple different offensive coordinators. None of them have worked.
It's not the coordinator.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't know. It all stops with the head coach.
Well, on the opposite of that spectrum is Missouri, who just seems to be completely on the rise.
Missouri,
right now.
We have tried to doubt them every step of the way. But David,
I still kind of doubt them.
Well,
I don't know.
I don't know that I can continue to doubt them because here's a couple of reasons. Number one, James Franklin's a great player. But Matty Mock looked more than sufficient.
He did.
He certainly filled in his role. One of the things you start to look at, though, it's possible, maybe you put them with Mississippi State. Missouri may have the best defensive line in the SEC.
And you know what? We overlook them all the time, but they have been impressive this year.
And we say all the time on this show, two things define success in the SEC. Your running game and how you play on the lines.
Yeah, you got to be able to run the football, got to be able to stop the run.
Right.
Even in this spread, high-octane world we live in.
Right. So stopping the run, getting pressure on the quarterback, Missouri is excellent at that. They have a huge number of seniors on this team as well.
They do.
And if you look back to Auburn's team in 2010, very senior-laden team. I think that was one of the main reasons, of course, along with Cam Newton, that helps too, but having Cam Newton alone would not have been enough to win a national championship. You got to have seniors too. I think I may start feeling some Missouri here, David.
Here's the thing that keeps holding me back. Auburn had success previously. They're an organization that knows what success is. Missouri does not know what true success is in football yet. They've had some years, a couple years ago,
they had some good
with Blaine Gabbert, where they were okay.
Yeah.
Finished the year in the top 15. They are right now BCS number 5.
Yeah.
They control their own destiny in the East. They are being propped up. Everybody's talking about them now. I don't know they know how to handle that.
Well, they'll stumble at some point. But I don't think it's going to be this week. They play South Carolina this week.
They do.
I think Missouri handles them.
I don't know. For some reason, I agree with all your points, but I keep coming back to it's Missouri. And that might be my own problem. I think somehow old ball coach is going to figure out a way to make this a big game for South Carolina.
Yeah, it'll be a great coaching job by Spurrier if he does, but I'm going to take Missouri in that one.
All right, I'll take South Carolina because what do I have to lose?
What's the line on that game? It's only
3.5, so it's very close.
Very close, yeah, okay. Speaking of upsets as well, LSU going down to Ole Miss. Last week on the show, I thought about pulling the trigger on that one. You talked me out of it.
I did.
So I didn't do it.
You were talking to River Craycraft.
I shouldn't have taken your opinion.
Listened.
That was stupid. No.
That's fine, because I said the same thing about you last year.
Anyway, LSU going down to Ole Miss, it kind of seemed like maybe it was a matter of time for LSU before they lost a game. I didn't really think they looked as great in the Auburn game as a lot of the national commentators thought they did. Unfortunately, LSU, they don't really control their own destiny at this point for the West anymore. Don't really have much to play for. They play Furman this week, so no big issues there. Ole Miss plays Idaho this week, but we kind of know where LSU's at. The offense kind of regressed this week. They had some issues. That was bound to happen at some point.
I think they have some big line issues they need to get addressed.
Ole Miss, though, they have had a real tough stretch here, having to play Auburn, Texas A&M. They got LSU.
It's kind of the blueprint with a young team. It's what happens. You have disappointments, then they play way beyond potential for a game, and then they're right back down. So, I don't know. Trying to guess the roller coaster that is Ole Miss, that's going to be kind of difficult going down the rest of the schedule.
All right, we talked about Georgia going down to Vanderbilt last week. Was that surprising to you, David? It was a little bit to me still.
It was still a little surprising, but just how beat up Georgia is. I mean, they're using Aaron Murray just to prop open the
They have basically no wide receivers at this point.
No.
If you remember, my number one question for Georgia at the beginning of the season is, will they have a number one receiver step up? At this point, the question is, do they have anybody with hands who can catch a football at all?
I think they would take the kid who committed to Florida to walk on.
The basketball guy?
The one-hand
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's better than what they got.
I think it is.
That was probably offensive, wasn't it?
Maybe
I should
a
have
little.
taken that back. But anyway, Georgia gets the week off to try to get some guys healthy. Vanderbilt rolls into College Station to try to take on Texas A&M.
Before you even ask the question, no, there's no chance.
No chance, huh?
No. A&M exacts their revenge all over the Commodores.
Yeah.
It gets ugly.
I agree. I think Johnny Football, who is going to play this weekend, the only thing I could think of, David, when Johnny Manziel went down in that Auburn game and they took him back in the tunnel, the only thing I could think of was Varsity Blues. Billy Bob getting shot up with a...
And I just knew, he's getting something shot into him.
He ain't feeling it. He's going to feel it tomorrow. But he's not feeling it right now.
Yeah.
Bud Kilmer was back in there just watching, going, yeah, that's right.
And they went and got him a football. It was pretty nice.
It was great. Anyway, Johnny Manziel's supposed to play Vandy. It was a good win against Georgia, but it's not going to happen.
17.5-point spread. Is that enough?
That's probably about right.
I'd say that it's more than that.
Really?
I really think this gets ugly.
Okay. Then we have a game tonight that actually just started. The only way people would actually watch this game, Kentucky and Mississippi State, since it's on Thursday.
The team of the big losers.
Mississippi State having a disappointing season.
Which I think both of us predicted this year.
Yeah, we did. I mean, Dan Mullen, his only win over an SEC West opponent not named Ole Miss was Auburn last year, when Auburn's worst year basically ever.
Right.
At some point, you start asking, how much longer is the Dan Mullen show going to go on?
And I really don't think he's to blame, but he's at Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ceiling there.
They only beat Bowling Green by 1 last week.
Yeah.
It's just...
I don't know. I mean,
it's bad.
I think Mississippi State fans are expecting more now than they used to. And
I think that's Mississippi State fan problems.
Maybe, but maybe you try something else after this season. I don't know.
But who are you going to get? I mean, that's a tough sell.
Yeah, I don't know.
Think you can get another Big Ten coach to jump ship?
Ooh, and that might be risky, especially if they start mouthing off about how their Big Ten record was better than Nick Saban.
Yeah.
Brett B. Lemon, we're talking to you. Anyway.
Go get him, Brett. I know you're going to get one.
Mississippi State, certainly some questions there. I do think they pick up a win here tonight versus Kentucky, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's too debatable. I mean, Kentucky's just bad.
Yeah.
They're running, and we talked about it at the beginning of the year. I won't harp on it too much. They're running an air raid offense with no quarterback. I mean, you can't do that. You have to have a quarterback to run that system.
Yeah, it's going to take a couple of years for Mark Stoops to get Kentucky competitive. I think he can at least turn them into a team that he can get them to probably a Vanderbilt level,
Mississippi State level.
I think he can get them to a Vandy level there, where they're a team that people are legitimately not wanting to play, but still not really winning the games.
No, I don't know.
We'll see.
I think Mississippi State, which defines as like everybody loses their minds when they win 8 games, and then they win like 6 the rest of his career.
We'll see. Maybe somewhere in between that level.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what happens. Let's take another quick break, David. On the other side, we will discuss the standings for the Big Ten that we mentioned. Things got a little wild and crazy last week with all the upsets. We'll run you through that. Got some other news and notes to run through as well, so stick around. We'll be back on Outputting Our Coverage.
Well, we're moving on now to the east side, to a deluxe apartment in the sky. We're moving on to the east side. We finally got a piece of the pie. Fish don't fry in the kitchen, beans don't burn on the grill. Took a whole lot of trying just to get up that hill. Now we're up in the big leagues.
All right, welcome back to Outputting Our Coverage. Nobody was really moving on up last weekend with the pick'em. It was a lot of just gnashing of teeth and crying and 3-7 finishes. It was pretty bad.
3-7 was not so bad when my cohort picker extraordinaire went 4-6.
Yeah,
6-4 is impressive to me. This week.
Last weekend 6-4 is like a 10-0 in a normal week.
Right.
I mean, it was a real tough week with all those upsets.
Good job, McCourt, Jay, and Maryland Aub.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty impressive stuff there.
Hillbilly Man 52, 5-5. I mean, that's pretty respectable.
Yeah. Yep.
Moobs 5-5, staying on top of the rankings. For the season, we've got Moobs still 1 game ahead of Boobs. So I mean, they're just going to stick together,
ahead, man.
Yeah,
one step.
We got Brugernaut and Andy tied for 3rd. Got kind of a log jam in between 5, 7, and 8. And I am still holding down 19. I'm going to start adopting Vanderbilt's slogan, "Anchor Down."
Yeah,
that's just going to be my new. That is the official Doo-Doo River Craycraft Pick'em slogan.
Should it be "Anchor Up"? Wouldn't that be a better slogan to use?
No. I'm keeping the anchor down. I'm just holding down the last place, so nobody else has to worry about it.
Making sure we don't float away.
I'm basically the caboose.
That's good. It's good to know. We do have some other somewhat tough games on the Pick'em this week. I put the number 2 game on the Pick'em on here specifically because of what you said last week, David. Wake Forest and Miami. I'm just going to let you run with this.
Miami is going to trip up. I really think they are. Wake Forest always beats a team they're not supposed to. And Miami always loses a game they're not supposed to lose. They got big news. They just beat Maryland. I think it's perfect. It's during the day, like really early game. I think this just kind of sets up for Wake Forest.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no way that happens. I'm just saying.
All right,
there's no way.
The line is 20.5. If this was against the line, there's no question in my mind I take Wake Forest, but I'm taking Wake Forest.
Okay.
Miami's going to win.
We'll see. We'll revisit that one next week. Nebraska and Minnesota, David.
Minnesota finally has a head coach who's not having a seizure every game. He finally took a step back.
Yep.
They've got a coach there. Had a big win last week against Northwestern.
Yep.
Nobody really talked about it, and it was at Northwestern. Playing at home against a Nebraska team who's a little underwhelming with their schedule this year, but I still think Nebraska wins this
I
one.
agree. Nebraska wins, but Minnesota definitely an overlooked team that's better than people think.
I think so.
Penn State, Ohio State. Any question the Penn Staters can take down the other Staters?
I really wish there was, but no, there's not. Because
agree.
I watched the Michigan game where Penn State came back and won this one in a ridiculous 4 overtime game. Penn State should not have been in that game. The only reason Penn State was in that game is because Michigan is a lot worse than we thought. I cannot see them coming into Ohio State and winning that game.
Yeah, I can't either. Ohio State really doesn't have any that tough of a path coming forward.
They don't. Do you see a loss in at Purdue, at Illinois, home against Indiana, at Michigan?
The only chance is Michigan. That's it.
I think another chance would be Illinois. That's a really interesting game to me.
Really? No.
I'd say watch out for that one.
I don't think so, but maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. I don't know. They score a lot of points.
Okay, I could see that. Speaking of scoring points, Texas Tech at number 9, traveling to Oklahoma this week. Oklahoma got destroyed by Texas. We all were surprised by that one. Texas Tech hasn't really played anybody yet.
Right. Which is why their defensive numbers are always so high
Right.
up until this point in the season.
Right. So this is kind of a tough call. 7.5 point line in favor of Oklahoma at this point.
I am a big Kingsbury fan. That's the coach at Texas Tech, and man, he looks the part, but his philosophy on offense I think is pretty interesting. You can tell the players, if you ever sit down and watch a Texas Tech game, they're not really looking around trying to figure out what formation they're supposed to be in. They're there. I mean, every one of them's ready. They're on the same page. They don't have to fight about a whole lot. I'm really impressed with the offense. I'm taking Tech.
I agree with you. I think he's a pretty impressive coach. However, the way the Big 12 normally goes, this just screams to me Oklahoma win.
And it definitely could be. I mean, came off a rough loss to Texas.
It's difficult to make predictions about Big 12 teams because it seems like they're always all over the map. And Texas Tech at this point, I don't think they're quite as good as the top 10 rankings. I expect Oklahoma to bring them down.
Okay.
UCLA and Oregon. Oregon continuing a pretty rough stretch of opponents that they're having to play here. UCLA as well. The Pac-12 really a strong league this year, as much as it may chagrin us to admit that.
They are.
UCLA just playing some good football, but I don't think anybody can touch Oregon right now.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I'm going to pick Oregon. I think you are too. I'd like to spend the time looking at if Oregon wins these next 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Number 11 UCLA at Stanford.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I think we all assume they'll jump Florida State for number 2. Do they go all the way to number 1? Do you think that if they win both games by 30?
Let's save that. I want to talk about
Okay.
the rankings at the end here.
All right.
So it's plausible. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
But Oregon to 23.5 point favorite. Oregon number 2, UCLA number 11.
I still
and
think
they're
that's fair.
23.5 point favorite. I agree with you, but that's crazy.
Yeah.
Texas and TCU.
I think this is Texas all the way.
Really?
I really want to take TCU at home.
It's a 1.5 point line, David.
It's a 1.5 point line, but have you seen who TCU's lost to?
I
They are not the normal TCU. They lost not only to LSU, at Texas Tech, they lost to Oklahoma, and then they lost by 14 to a bad Oklahoma State team.
Yeah, I mean, the Oklahoma State one's not a good loss, but the other ones I can live with.
They're not that bad, but then your wins, you're talking about a 10-point win against Kansas.
They're not as explosive offensively as they've been in some years, but they still have a good defense. I'm going to go TCU in this one.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the home team. I think
We all hate Texas,
Mac
so I
Brown
understand
still has
that.
some issues. I think they're going to lose that game.
Okay.
That's just what I think.
I think what happens is Mac Brown wins just enough games to piss everybody off and come back next
Yeah,
year.
that's going to be hilarious. All right, let's talk Heisman real quick, David.
Okay.
How much time do we? We have a little bit of time
got a
to do
couple
this.
minutes.
At this point, Jadeveon Clowney totally out of the race. He was kind
Shouldn't
of
have been in there in the first
shouldn't
place.
have been in it. You kind of said it's Oregon quarterback Marcus Mariota's to lose.
I really think it is. He's putting up ridiculous numbers every single game. His efficiency rating is huge. I think he runs a lot better than people ever predicted. He's got a lot of rushing touchdowns. But then you brought up Jameis Winston, who is having a tremendous year.
That dude he's a cyborg. It's the only explanation. He feels no fear. He's a redshirt freshman, David. He's giving speeches to the locker room
and just ice water running through all of his veins. It's great. And then threw for a school record like 400 something yards against Clemson on a national stage at their place.
Yeah, this is going to make some people mad, but his demeanor reminds me of Cam Newton. He doesn't get stressed out, doesn't get nervous. He's always out there having a good time. I think that rubs some people the wrong way, but it works for some of these guys.
I think he is more politically correct than Cam, and he's not going to be one of those that has a controversy around him. I mean, from what everybody talks, he's a very smart, straightforward kid, straight-laced, kind of walks a straight path, which Cam, for all intents and purposes, has in the last couple of years. I mean, he got kicked off of Florida.
Yeah, he did have some problems in the past, but just their approach to
I do see a lot of similarities.
There's some similarities.
I think he's a better passer at this point in his career.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Although, if you watch Cam Newton at the beginning of that season to the end, he improved a lot.
Oh, there's no question.
I think, but Jameis, he's probably got maybe 1 or maybe 2 more years.
Oh, yeah.
So that Florida State's going to be a force to be reckoned with here, Dave.
You know what would be an interesting trade? Minnesota Vikings try to get, they have Christian Ponder. Right. They try to give Ponder back to Florida State for Winston and throw in something like an Adrian Peterson.
I bet they probably wish they could right now.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little. I think those guys are the two top contenders.
I don't know of anybody.
Maybe make some arguments for some other folks.
Go look up. There's a guy in Florida or in Fresno State who's putting up ridiculous numbers on a surprising team. He should have more consideration, but nobody knows about him.
What the Heisman means now is who is the best player on one of the top teams. That's all it means.
It is, and typically quarterback.
Yeah, it's not the best player in football. It has not been for some time. First BCS rankings of the season came out this past week, David. Aren't you going to miss those, just nostalgically?
I actually am, because I think that the committee's a bad idea.
Yeah,
but that's a different topic.
A different point. Alabama number 1. Florida State was actually number 2 in the BCS rankings, just based on beating Clemson.
Yeah, big game.
Oregon number 3. How would you rank those 3 teams right now, based on what you've seen?
I'm going to make a lot of people mad. I would probably go Oregon, Florida State, Alabama. I mean, and
you actually stole the thunder from me, because I was probably going to make some people mad. I don't necessarily think, based on what they've done, Alabama deserves to be number 1 right now.
I think it's one of those wire-to-wire things. Yeah. Somebody's got to come and knock them off.
Right. That's the problem we have with the preseason polls. It does introduce some bias, and it's hard for somebody to move down unless they lose. That's just how it is.
It is.
I actually might, after what I saw this past weekend, put Florida State number 1.
I'm not ready to do that. Florida State looked great against Clemson. I'm worried about how long they can put it together.
Yeah.
Oregon, they just look good, and they're playing good competition. I just don't know anybody can stop that.
Yeah, and that is a good point. Oregon is going to be tested a lot more than Florida State is this year.
They are.
Florida State got up big for their one game. They had to get up for a game with Miami. That's about it.
The Pac-12 is a better conference than the ACC is.
You could almost make an argument that the Pac-12 is a better conference than the SEC this year.
Maybe. I actually think that this past week helps the SEC's argument more than hurts it. Now, in a lot of national eyes, it probably is going to hurt because the big guys went down. I just think it shows how you have so much talent spread across all the teams.
I can agree with that. It's hard to say for sure when the teams aren't playing a lot of each other, but I don't know. I think it's going to be... This is one of the most fascinating BCS seasons I can remember. There's just a lot of contenders out there.
What if Oregon, Florida State, and Alabama do not lose another game the rest of the year? Who's in that national championship game?
Alabama gets in for sure, just because of the SEC name and the SEC.
Right, you got to keep that going. I think Oregon's the other one.
Oregon gets in too, because they've been good longer. I think that's what it'll come to, and they will have a better resume because they've beaten more good teams.
Yeah.
So if everybody goes undefeated, it's Alabama, Oregon for sure.
And this will be Auburn from 2009.
2004.
2004.
Yeah, same deal. How ironic would that be on the last year of the B? This would be an awesome year to have the playoff start.
It would be.
I mean,
I think they should just say, yeah, you know what, guys, we're going to go ahead and start them this year.
I mean, they should just say, you know what, why don't we just have the playoff with the BCS rankings instead of the committee? They'll see how good it works and say, why don't we just keep doing this?
Florida State, Oregon, and Alabama, Stanford, to me, would be very interesting
that's
games all the way
fascinating.
around.
I mean, that's great stuff there.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we won't get it.
No.
It's just how it goes.
All right, we're cutting it close.
All right, that's all the time we got on outputting our coverage this week. We appreciate you listening in. Enjoy some great football this weekend. We'll see you next week.